Hello everyone and welcome to this, the 6th episode of Mind the Gaps, a journey through popular culture. Well, I took a bit of a hiatus over Christmas and New Year's, even though there were a couple of films I had planned on experiencing for the first time and podcasting about over the break. However, time, commitments, the holidays, they took precedence. So, regardless, I hope you and yours had as fun a time celebrating the holidays as I did. But I'm back, yay! Well, in the last week of 2016, we lost both Carrie Fisher and her mother, Debbie Reynolds, a day apart from one another, which is a pretty amazing twist of fate, albeit a sad one. Their deaths got me thinking about their careers in film, as well as the careers of many others that passed away in the same year. Prince, David Bowie, Gene Wilder, Alan Rickman, Gary Shandling. Those are just a few of the names that come up on a simple Google search of people who died in 2016, and all of them have films that I have never seen. Now, some of those films are classics, like Debbie Reynolds in Singing in the Rain. Others, like Gary Shandling's What Planet Are You From? I don't think that one is, no. Bowie's Star Turn in Labyrinth and Carrie Fisher's autobiographical Postcards from the Edge are also on my list. So how would one in the business of podcasting about films go about honoring the memories of the stars that we lost recently? Well, the best way, at least the best that I can think of, is to try to make note of the stars we lost last year when I watched one of their films. And I've moved a lot of them up in my schedule so I can do just that. So keep your eyes peeled and your ears open as I will begin that leg of my journey through film. I didn't watch a lot of new films over the holiday. I ventured to the theater to watch the new Star Wars film with my sons. That's a pilgrimage that we will most likely be making on an annual basis for the foreseeable future. I reviewed it along with them on my other podcast because I said so. So if you would like to hear my initial reaction to it, check it out. But to briefly review it here, I will say that I enjoyed it for what it was. It was a war movie in space. It was far more grounded than the saga films that I grew up watching, but it was still a fun movie to watch. I also spent some time digging into my personal DVD and Blu-ray library, rewatching the Back to the Future trilogy, as I do every year, Lord of the Rings, Better Off Dead, and the usual Christmas movies that I watch every year, including It's a Wonderful Life, which made me cry yet again. Also, my family and I watched and enjoyed Finding Dory, which proved once again that Pixar really is the best movie studio around right now. Okay, enough about my holiday. You guys are listening to see what I think about a movie that I have never seen before that almost everyone else has seen, right? To be honest, I completely fell off schedule with what films I wanted to experience, and never sought them out to get them in my hands at time. So what does a guy do? He does the next best thing. He grabs what is available at his local library. So I picked up a collection of Stanley Kubrick films and picked one of his many classics to watch and review. Now, I've only seen a couple of Kubrick movies, so why don't I give my thoughts on those first and then talk about the movie I chose to screen for this episode. First up, A Clockwork Orange. I saw this movie when I was still in high school, and back then it just blew me away. The sexually explicit and violent content was like nothing I had ever seen before. It was so brazen in its sadism that I really didn't know what to think of it when I first saw it. I watched it a few years later once I had a couple of semesters in film school under my belt, and I could finally see the underlying message to the story itself. First of all, Malcolm McDowell was brilliant as the main character and narrator, Alex, but you couldn't really root for him. He wasn't even an anti-hero. He was a villain. But he was the lens by which you viewed his well-layered futuristic world of sex, violence, and sexual violence. From an artistic standpoint, A Clockwork Orange was beautifully crafted. But from a moral standpoint, it's not a movie I think I can ever watch again, nor can I in good conscience recommend it. It's just too depraved. It's not worth the experience. Next up, The Shining. I've only watched this twice, and the last time I watched it was 20 years ago. Jack Nicholson plays Jack Torrance, who, he's one of the greatest villains in the history of film, really. His descent into madness was pitch perfect and very scary. There are a ton of iconic shots in this film, and if there is anything Kubrick should be known for, it's his ability to retain his voice in a variety of genres. In The Shining, which was loosely based on a Stephen King novel, Kubrick showed he was a master of the lens, framing shot after shot that filmmakers to this day are trying to mimic or pay homage to. Now, I may have to watch this again at some point, but just to see what I've forgotten. Then again, maybe I better leave what I've forgotten in the recesses of my subconscious where it probably belongs. Next up, Full Metal Jacket. This is really two films in one. The first, and better, half takes place on Parris Island, where new Marine recruits are trained to go to Vietnam. The second, in my opinion, the weaker half, takes place in Vietnam. The first half, with R. Lee Ermey as the grizzled drill sergeant and Vincent D'Onofrio as Private Pyle at the center, is as disturbing as it is hypnotic. Ermey's rapid-fire teardowns of each recruit, or maggot, would destroy any mere mortal. D'Onofrio's descent into madness is mesmerizing, and their tragic confrontation is one of the most difficult things to watch in a film. So the weaker last half serves only to put a period, or an ellipse, at the end of the first half. The Marines have been fully broken, and their behavior in the jungles of Vietnam just solidify that brokenness and depravity. But overall, Full Metal Jacket is a really good film, and one that I can't help but watch if I catch it on TV, especially if it's in the beginning scenes. So, what film did I select to watch from the larger Kubrick library of films? The decision really wasn't that difficult, even though there are 3 solid films by Kubrick that I haven't experienced yet: Spartacus, 2001, and Dr. Strangelove. In the interest of full disclosure, 2 of those films I have tried watching in the past and fallen asleep. The third, I had no clue that Kubrick had directed it. All 3 will be reviewed at some point in the future, but for this particular episode, I chose to review Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. With a new president about to be inaugurated here in the United States, and a potential new Cold War beginning, I thought, what better way to mark the occasion than with a movie about the first Cold War? Now, I have tried to watch Dr. Strangelove before, multiple times, and every time I have fallen asleep. There could be a variety of reasons for this, but it's not a judgment on the film. My recollection of what I have seen of it is fuzzy at best, and it could just be the result of pop culture osmosis. First, let me give you a bit of a personal story about my near experience with this film. I remember, when I was in my first semester at film school, I had struck up a friendship with a classmate who had a Laserdisc player. What's funny about this is, I can't even remember his name. He was so nice, too. He even gave me a ride to the city and introduced me to espresso. He was an English expat who had moved to the U.S. with his parents when he was a kid. He was a much better filmmaker than I was, and he was a very good guy. Just wish I remembered his name. Anyway, he had a Laserdisc player. That's where I'm getting at. And he would host movie screenings in his dorm room. A bunch of film nerds would get together and watch a classic movie on Laserdisc. Totally something I would love to do now, but was unable to do then, probably because of work. The first screening he had was Dr. Strangelove, and he invited me there. Now, I never took him up on his invite, and I still haven't seen Dr. Strangelove, but I'm about to change that fact with this show. In a lot of ways, I owe this show to that invite. So what do I know about the film, Dr. Strangelove? I know it stars Peter Sellers, who I adored in the Pink Panther films, and he was also in a movie called Being There that I barely remember, that I have to rewatch at some point. He was really good in that as well, very funny. It was his last movie, but that's besides the point. Now, in Dr. Strangelove, I know he plays 2, maybe 3 characters in the film, one of which is the President of the United States. I know it was released in the middle of the Cold War, and it ends with a cowboy riding a nuclear bomb out of an airplane. I also know that it's ranked 26th on the AFI Top 100 Films list. And that's about all I know. So why don't I just watch the movie and get on to my review?
Attack!
Russia. Oh. Base.
10 females to each male.
machine?
Fluids.
The Doomsday Machine.
Blast off!
Where's my shorts?
Where's the bathroom?
Buck, should I get it?
On the hotline.
Dr. Strangelove.
Or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and
Love the bomb. A moving picture.
I shouldn't tell you this, Mandrake, but you're a good officer and you have a right to know. It looks like we're in a shooting war.
Hell. All the Russians involved, sir?
Well, boys, I reckon this is it. Nuclear combat toe-to-toe with the Ruskies.
I don't like the look of this, Fred. I tell you what you better do, old buddy.
I was under the impression that I was the only one in authority to order the use of nuclear weapons.
That's right, sir. You are the only person authorized to do so. And although I hate to judge before all the facts are in, it's beginning to look like General Ripper exceeded his authority.
I first became aware of it, Mandrake, during the physical act of love.
Missile still deflecting. Range 1 mile. Start lever to cut off. Cut off. Station power.
Has that plane really got a chance of getting through?
Well, sir, if the pilot's good, see? I mean, if he's really sharp, he can barrel that baby in so low. I mean, you ought to see it sometime. It's a sight. A big plane like a 52. Vroom! It's jet exhaust frying chickens in the barnyard.
Dr. Strangelove.
or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and
Love the bomb. A moving picture.
As a design nerd, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how much I love the opening credits. The juxtaposition of handwritten titles with the almost romantic depiction of military aircraft is absurd, but elegant, which is weird. It's during the credits that I first learned that the film is based on a book entitled Red Alert. When I saw this, I just had to dig into it a bit more, and it turns out that the book's author, Peter George, collaborated on the screenplay with Kubrick. This obviously makes me wonder what The Shining would have been like had Kubrick worked with Stephen King, because King has absolutely no love for Kubrick's adaptation of his book. Whereas, it seems that Peter George would have had some level of pride in his work with Kubrick on this film. In my limited amount of research, it appears as though this is a very loose adaptation of the book. Sort of like The Shining, actually. Anyway, the screenplay was the result of multiple conversations between Kubrick, George, and economist Thomas Schelling. Perhaps it's just me, but I like the idea of cross-disciplinary collaboration. It helps maintain a level of authenticity within the story. Now, I can't help but draw comparisons with The Manchurian Candidate, mostly in their use of an omniscient narrator in the beginning scenes to establish plot points or expose the motivations of characters. I'm not sure if this was typical for the films of the era, or if this was a stylistic choice in regards to military films of the time. It's also worth noting that there is a warning title card at the beginning of the film, much like the cautionary warning given at the beginning of the movie Frankenstein.
Goldie, did you say